Right, welcome to the third and final session on selecting the response. Following on from last session then, where we looked at the factors that go into the speed of the response and ways in which you can improve the speed of response. We're going to continue that theme to a certain degree today, but we're also going to look at ways in which opponents can attempt to manipulate your need to respond quickly in a particular situation. So last session, briefly, but still mentioned the word anticipation. Okay, and anticipation is essentially our ability to predict what's going to happen, where it's going to happen, and when it's going to happen. And we looked how that at the ways in which that would help selective attention. In particular, overlearning would help anticipation, which would help selective attention, because then I'm aware of what I should be looking for, so that it can tell me what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and where it's going to happen. And those three elements are really quite important. They're kind of what and where and when. So we talked about what and where. So what and where is going to happen is anticipation, but also when. And there are two key terms for that. Okay, so in terms of describing what and where is about to happen, or predicting what and where is going to happen, that's known as spatial anticipation. Okay, that's known as spatial anticipation. And when it's going to happen is known as temporal. So a couple of worked examples of that. So what and where, if we take a cricket batsman, you might say, well, he knows what's going to happen. The fast bowler's going to bowl the ball, but actually he doesn't know what kind of ball he's going to get. It's going to be a short ball, so bounce quite early down the wicket. Is it going to bounce right in front of him? Is it going to spin? Is it going to be a fast ball? Is he going to try and disguise it to be a slower ball? So often a batsman then has to attempt to anticipate what's going to happen, because batsmen in cricket have around, well, I don't know, just under 0.5 of a second to react to a fast bowler. So in terms of what's going to happen, he's got to make his mind up quite quickly, and so often they will try and look at the way in which the bowler is running up, but also the way in which he's gripping the ball. So that might tell them what, and it similarly might tell them where the ball is going to land. So all these things they're attempting to anticipate. If we take when, we can consider the 100-metre sprinter. Now, this is where anticipation is helped, because sprinters, people within races, whether it be swimming or athletics, they actually get a warning sign. So they get in 100 metres, on your marks, get set. So they know they're being warned that the next signal is going to be go. So they're given at least a bit of an opportunity, but they're still attempting to anticipate when to go. And Colin Jackson, way back when I was a lad, when he was a 110-metre hurdler, he would often talk about going on the B of the bang. So that's what we meant by temporal anticipation. Okay, essentially predicting when something's going to happen. And in the round, if we look at them both together, last session I talked about the netballer. Okay, the wing defence or the goal defence, attempting to intercept the ball, and to do so, that 45-degree angle, that peripheral vision, kind of half an eye on the ball, half an eye on the player, where I'm attempting to predict. Okay, I'm looking at the player, I'm looking at the key cues of the player in terms of what kind of pass. So how are they gripping the ball? Does it look like a bounce pass? Does it look like a javelin pass, an overhead pass? Does it look like a chest pass? But also where are they going to pass it? Where are they looking? But also, where is my opponent signalling? Where does it look like they're going to go? Where are they dodging towards? So that's the what and the where and when. Well, I'm really trying to pick the right cues about someone's going to pass. So if someone kind of fakes a pass, they tend to hold the ball like this. Actually, I do have one here. So they tend to hold the ball like this, but then maybe their extension of the elbow is pretty short, and you've got to try and pick that out, an extension. But you know, certainly potentially, if you are quite autonomous and you have a high level of experience, that you'll notice that the elbows will go beyond a particular angle in extension. You know that's the point of release, and at that point you're going to attempt to intercept. So if you get all of this right, then you make the interception. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. But just coming back to that idea of pretending, that kind of idea of disguise, okay, I might do it, I might not. This is where we attempt to try and manipulate an opponent's need to respond quickly to what's going on. Okay, now that's quite an important aspect of what we're going to look at now, and there are two key terms that I need you to be well aware of within this element. The first one is known as the psychological refractory period. Apologies for my writing. Let's go further away. There's an O, and that's an R. Okay? The psychological refractory period. Now, the psychological refractory period is the delay in responding to a second of two closely spaced stimuli. So I'll say that again. The psychological refractory period is the delay in responding to the second of two closely spaced stimuli. So what does that look like? Well, here's stimulus one. Okay, so we've identified that through selective attention. We've identified this as a stimulus that we will want to respond to. And that in itself provides then, back up here, reaction one. Okay, so the stimulus and reaction. Now, if you remember from 2 sessions ago, we talked about reaction as the time between the onset of a stimulus or the recognition of a stimulus and the beginning of the movement. So the decision-making process. So this is our decision-making time here. However, because an opponent has used disguise, potentially here we have already, before we got to that point, we have stimulus 2. And that in itself will require, sorry for being so far out here, that looks awful, but anyway, it's there, you can see it. I do notice, however, also that I tend to go downwards as well, but there is an element here where we do have that decision. Right, this is the important part, because actually what we've noticed here, that stimulus 2 has happened before we processed our response to stimulus 1. Now, what is key for you to understand this, and it's similar, I suppose, in many respects, in when we talked about the visuospatial sketchpad and the phonological loop in the working memory, that they can only deal with one piece of information in one go. It's exactly the same here. So I cannot respond to this stimulus here, even though I've seen it, until I've finished responding to the first one. And what I have now here, I don't know if you can see that, I've done it so low. Here, this bit here, so from there to there, okay? This is my psychological refractory period, okay? It's my psychological refractory period here. Just put that up there just to show you that I have joined the two together. Sometimes this is known as slack, okay? But it is the time here, this is the delay, because I cannot begin to attend to this stimulus here, even though I've recognised it, even though I know it's happened, even though potentially in my head I've seen, nuts. I've only gone and responded to the wrong stimulus, okay, the wrong dodge. Then even though I can see it, I cannot respond to it, I cannot attend to it, I cannot deal with it until I've completed the processing of the first response. So this is really important when we look at things like a dodge. A feint dodge was a reverse pivot in netball, for example, that sidestep that we get in rugby. Also, when we consider disguising a drop shot, when we're looking for a high clear, we look as though we're about to play a high clear in badminton. So what I'm attempting to do as an opponent is use my opponent's understanding of the key cues to draw him or her into making a false response. So I'm going to pretend to do one thing in the hope they fall for it, engage their decision-making process and create a response to it, so that I can create this bit of slack here to find space for myself and complete a successful movement. So whether I pretend to do a high clear, then at the last minute just take the pace off my shuttle, pace off my racket, sorry, to take the pace off the shuttle just to drop it over the net, or whether I pretend to go one way and then quickly go the other. All those things are designed to kind of utilise and manipulate and take advantage of somebody who's essentially trying to increase or decrease, beg your pardon, the speed of the reaction time, increase the speed of their response by identifying key cues and anticipating what's happening. All right, now So psychological refractory period, the delay in response to the second of two closely spaced stimuli, is coupled, and when I say coupled, I mean coupled with another term known as the single channel hypothesis. And when I say coupled, I mean that every time you use the term psychological refractory period, you should always be prepared then to use the single channel hypothesis, and vice versa. It might be that you get a question that's got the word single channel hypothesis in it, in which case I'd expect you to use the psychological refractory period in the question, and vice versa. And if it talks about anticipation, if it talks about delay and whatever, then I'm expecting you to use both. Okay? You always use them together because they work together hand in hand. And the single channel hypothesis is essentially, I must complete, I'll write this one down. I must complete my first response, or my response, to the first stimulus before attending to the second. Okay? I must complete my response to the first stimulus before I can attend to the second. And this is how disguise works, and this is why disguise works. Now, one of the best things you can do is go on to YouTube, where you are at the moment, and potentially highlight Lionel Messi, for example, and they will put through a number of clips of him performing different skills and what have you. But throughout, there is a plethora of examples of the psychological refractory period and the single channel hypothesis, up to a point where there's even one clip in one of the videos that I've seen where the defender is nutmegged, and you can see he is still moving forward, his head is behind him, he's looking, he knows where Messi's going now, he knows where the ball's going, but he cannot do anything about it until he has completed that first response to the original stimuli, and hence that's how it works. So if we take it back again, what's going to happen? Well, from terms of the performer has got to attempt to identify key cues, because that's what anticipation is all about, identifying the key cues. However, the opponent has got essentially to disguise real intentions. And if you disguise them well enough, you incur the psychological refractory period, and the space is there for you to use.